So first off, thank you so much for coming on and taking time out of your day for the Designing and for Equity Facilitator training. We're so happy and excited that you guys are with us, and also a huge thank you for taking time out of your day next Wednesday to participate in the World Savvy Festival. We absolutely couldn't do this work without you, and we know that your expertise and helpful to the students that you are working with on Wednesday. So thank you. Today we're going to start out with just some introductions of kind of who we are and what brings us to this space. We're going to talk a little bit more about equity and designing for equity in specifics. We'll have a lot of dialogue and discussion about that today. And then some reminders and details about the actual logistics of the day, and then time for conversation and questions or discussion points that we've missed. So real quickly, we would love to just hear a little bit about who you are and what brings you to this volunteering opportunity.
And Erica, I will pause really quick. I'm going to call someone in really quick, and then we can start those intros.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello?
Hi, Amy. This is Kelsey with World Savvy.
Hi. Oh, thanks so much.
Yeah, you are now in it's a group call with everyone at the Facilitator training. And I will share the slides we're working on with you by email.
Okay.
Great. All right. So Erica just introduced herself to everyone here. And we're going to start with introductions. People are going to share who they are and what brings them to this volunteer opportunity. So if you want to start, we could start with you.
Sure. Okay. I'm Amy Lippman. I'm the Director of Development, Communications, and Marketing for Experitas, a nonprofit educational organization based in Minneapolis. And we have worked partnered with World Savvy before, and I know schools who have participated in this event, and I'm just really excited to volunteer and learn more and see the students firsthand. They may be students we've worked with, but we also focus on cultural competence and educating kids. So
great, thank you.
For those of you that just popped on, we're going around and introducing who we are, and we left that purposely very open to kind of talk about who you are as an identity or a community member or however you would define yourself, and then also what brings you to this volunteering opportunity.
And you can unmute and say that, or just put it in the chat and I'll read your introduction as well.
All right, you guys hear me?
Yep.
Hi everyone, my name is Calvin. I'm a junior at McAllister in St. Paul, and I study political science and education, and I guess what brought me to this opportunity is I've been involved with previous World Savvy festivals. I've really enjoyed those experiences, and then I've been involved with teaching design and thinking to high school students in other capacities, mostly with Education First, which operates out of Boston. And I use he, him, his.
Hi everyone, I'm Heather. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I'm at the University of Minnesota, and I got introduced to World Savvy by my friend Cassie Kramer, who used to work with your organization, still a big advocate, and I've been to fundraisers and learned about you guys. I also work with equity and diversity at the University of Minnesota, and I'm a career counselor there. So excited to work with a younger population than I typically do. And I've also done some design thinking and some intro classes as far as career services too. So I'm excited to get involved. unmute, if you click on your screen and then the top, the second icon is the microphone, and you're welcome to unmute there, or type your little intro into the chat is also helpful, and Kelsey can share them out.
All right. Clara is in her first year at the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities, where she studies economics and Spanish studies. And she did the World Savvy Classrooms project in middle school, and this year she's also mentored a fifth grade class competing in their own World Savvy project. And again, I'm Kelsey. I'm a student engagement fellow with World Savvy. I've been the one emailing all those great emails to you all. And my connection to this work is that I was also a student in World Savvy Classrooms and attended the festival for 3 years as a student. And now I'm working with World Savvy. So that's my connection. Thanks, Claire, for that intro.
Can everyone hear me? Okay, I'm in a coffee shop, so I hope you can hear me, but everybody else here can't. I'm a first-year grad student at Minnesota. I'm in a program called Human Factors, which is it's in the design school. It's sort of the human sciences side of design. And I'm specifically interested in education design, and in particular, teaching these sort of broader competencies to younger folks. And there's a program here that's sort of a global entrepreneurship program that I was interested in, and the director of that told me about World Savvy, and I thought this was a really cool program, and so I thought volunteering would be a good way to check it out.
Thank you.
I can try and go next. Can everyone hear me? Similar to Justin, I'm also in a coffee shop with loud music, but it sounds like it's working out. I'm Julia. Similar to Calvin, I'm a junior at Macalester College here in St. Paul. I major in psychology, and I hope to go to graduate school for school psychology, but I also learn educational studies, and I'm very interested in working with children, clearly. I found out about World Savvy through kind of an email to my department, quite frankly, but I attended the K2A facilitator training earlier this semester, and met quite a few over there and had a great time and watching the festival, so I'm very excited.
Sorry, we can't hear you. We can't hear you, so sorry. It might be a browser issue, otherwise you can type in the chat and we can read it out.
All right, anyone else that we're missing that would like to share? Some of us chatting. Okay.
Erica, also just a note, not everyone's chat is showing up either, so we'll be improvising, and as people email me comments, I'll be reading those out as well. So,
okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Should I get started?
Actually, I have one intro to read out. Georgina is joining us, and Georgina is a youth worker and has experience leading cultural-specific leadership programming. Georgina also works to help coach other youth organizations to bring an equity lens to their youth programs, and decided to volunteer because this looks like a great event where youth voice is truly at the center. Thank you for that intro. Great. So I think we're good to go, Erica. And again, a reminder for folks, if you click on Erica's name, she'll be sharing her screen. And you can email or chat if you're having tech difficulties, and I'll do my best to accommodate.
All right. Thank you, Kelsey. We'll jump into our learning targets real quickly before we start. I can examine my own lens and the role this plays in my role as a facilitator. I can examine how my lens informs my thoughts and actions when facilitating with students. And I can identify how facilitators can assist students to examine the assumptions they are making during the design challenge process. One thing that we wanted to frame this whole conversation with, here at World Savvy, we're not claiming to be experts in equity and equity in design, and so just want to bring that to the forefront, and that we want this to be a dialogue and you adding and discussing things that you believe are left out of this conversation. Obviously, it's only an hour long, and so we are missing a lot of things, so feel free and please bring those up as we talk about some of these really important issues. Here is the definition for equity that World Savvy is functioning under at the moment, and we would love, you can just read that on your own. So when thinking about equity, a lot, and specifically equity in the design process, I think some of the words that stand out for us and what we want to highlight in this definition is really eliminating barriers that have prevented full participation for some groups, and thinking about as students dig into some of this work, they're going to be bringing up some of those conversations and highlighting those barriers. Also thinking about the distribution of resources and how resources are differently allocated for different students, and how that also may be highlighted within this design challenge. Additionally, within these conversations, students are going to be kind of talking about potentially oppression. And so we've discussed a little bit about oppression, and oppression is a system that is built into our daily life and stems beyond individual acts. We may notice different types of oppression, whether they be individual, institutional, structural, that affects really everything that we do, including learning and leading and teaching and designing and improving. So by noticing oppression and how it affects different people and different students and different lives, we will have the opportunity to really design, and solutions will have greater equity. So I think we potentially will hear students talking about these different levels of oppression, both on individual levels and institutional and structural, and it's a great space for students to discuss those things, especially when thinking about inclusivity on a school level. I'm saying inclusivity, I'm working under the assumption that you all have potentially watched those webinar videos and know that the design challenge question is how do we make more inclusive schools. So our role as facilitators is really about having conversations and prompting those conversations and answering questions around that question. I want to just open up the conversation a little bit to think about how is design thinking in and of itself an equitable process. So what you know already about design thinking and what you've maybe listened to and heard in our webinars that you've already watched on design thinking and our knowledge to action process, how do you see this as an equitable process? And everyone can jump in or type in the chat, or type to Kelsey.
As folks are thinking and preparing comments, I also just want to read out Beta's intro. Beta is the new Dean of Instructions with Hiawatha Academies and received their master's in urban education and will be serving predominantly students of color from low-income backgrounds, and heard about World Savvy from manager Shireen. And also Sarah joined us. Sarah, if you want to introduce yourself by chat, we're just saying who we are and how we got connected to World Savvy. Just want to make sure I had those intros in the space. And yeah, opening it up to answering that question either by chat or unmuting. How is design thinking an equitable process?
Well, I'll jump in. This is Heather, and I thought the videos were very helpful, and I've taken a few universal design classes and things like that. So I feel like the design process allows more voices to be heard and people with different opinions to weigh in just as heavily as what we've always done.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I'm going to read out a couple comments too. Megan says, much like the scientific method, design thinking is helpful on how to process challenges into a wider variety of solutions. Justin says that in the empathy stage, we may allow people to share their firsthand experiences, which makes it more bottom up. And Clara says that she thinks that the define stage makes the process more equitable because there is no one correct definition of inclusivity, and an individual's definition of inclusivity tells a lot about their own experiences and allows for there to be intersectionality and representation of different voices in the process. Thank you for all of those comments. Absolutely. Any follow-up comments or questions on those comments or the question we're discussing?
Thank you for all of those. Absolutely. And great that you all are identifying the ways that this process can look and really be equitable, not only for the students that they're designing with and for, but also for themselves going through this process with students that are from schools across the metro area. Super, super great. Thank you. I want to focus a little bit on how our identity is represented in the role as a facilitator, and thinking a little bit towards at the end of this, how does this influence the way we're potentially going to see and define as facilitators inclusivity? So I want you to just spend a minute or two thinking about these questions and how do they influence your role as a facilitator. How do these ideas influence the way we facilitate as or design process? And I want to open that up whole group.
I'll just throw out there a first reflection with that second question of how am I respectfully situated. I think the thing that's coming up for me immediately is the fact that I, along with the festival team at World Savvy, have designed what the students will be doing in this hour, right? We leave it as open and creative as possible, but there's still, we made the final call on the question, we chose the topic, we're providing the resources, and I think that that's obviously, especially within this question and this activity, a huge place of power to be creating that space and defining that in a lot of ways. And I think recognizing that and how I am in that day and keeping that in mind in terms of being flexible with the design of the day and things like that is something I'm thinking about with my role.
Thank you, Kelsey.
Julia says that we need to ensure we are aware of whatever social privileges we are granted and to quote unquote check them at the door when we transform into facilitators. They influence how we perceive action and decision making at what needs to be fixed and solved. Absolutely.
I also think the role as facilitator carries a breadth of knowledge and power just in the age and being older and bringing that with just as a part of the role brings that power.
So I had a quick question for Maria. Our facilitation groups, are we doing them at all with a partner or just us with each group? Because I think co-facilitation can sometimes help highlight maybe bias that you don't know about.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. So the way the room will work, and this is highlighted a bit in the facilitator videos too, is that so Calvin, actually, who's on this call, will be the lead facilitator in the room. So he'll have the microphone and give the main directions to the groups at each step. And Julia and Clara, who are also in this call, will be support lead facilitators who will be checking in with all the facilitators in the room, and they'll be a go-to resource for you. And then each of you facilitators will have a few tables of students that you're working with. So unfortunately, we don't have the capacity to have enough volunteers for 1 or 2 per table, but those are several different resources in the room. There will also be World Savvy staff and teachers in the room that will be checking in at tables and a resource to be checking in that way as well. I think that's a great point, and really keeping in mind all the resources we have in the room for support and checking in as well.
And encourage you as well to go ahead and stop and ask the question if you're unsure of how to move forward with students. Absolutely welcomed. All right, I'm going to jump then to our next question, and just to think about how do you define inclusive schools? So when you hear the word inclusive, and when you're thinking about pairing that word with schools, what resonates with you in your thinking about that? And this is again a dialogue space where we're hoping people share out and talk through, and we can see the perspectives that folks are bringing to this dialogue.
Okay, at the risk of talking too much, I just got back from a workshop at the University of Minnesota to try and improve bias on hiring practices and job searches. And the University of Minnesota has inclusivity and diversity goals written everywhere, but the follow through is not always there because people tend to use their implicit bias to gravitate towards things they know and people that look like them and have the same experiences as them. So just increasing the awareness. So inclusive schools, that's a tough definition for me because I don't know how you can include everyone and everything, but if you can at least be open to new ideas and work on checking in with your own extroverted biases as well as implicit bias. So now let someone else talk. Jump in, people.
Thank you for that. Megan had a comment that I'll read out. Megan said that creating a space that allows all people in and quote unquote a seat at the table to learn. And Justin says, I have no idea. I'm hoping the kids can teach me something. Absolutely.
I think about language. So much of what we're teaching and is in English as a first language, and just thinking about all the students that come to our schools and speak other languages and potentially aren't given the opportunity to think and write and speak in other languages, and what that does for their idea of their other languages that they bring.
Yeah. Julia also says that maintaining a growth mindset when thinking about what are problems for others, as these problems may not be on your radar when thinking about what is or isn't inclusive. I'd also like to just mention that a lot of the comments people are saying are reminding me a lot of some of the resources in the case study that students will be working with. That was linked in the facilitator guide I emailed you all. I'll resend that too, but if you have a chance to dig into those resources before the day of, it'd be awesome. And a lot of the ideas that are coming up I'm seeing reflected in that, which is great.
I think too what we want to emphasize with this is that we may see inclusive schools very differently than the students that we're working with, and so absolutely, as one has already mentioned, learning from the students will be a really powerful tool as well in this space. We have two more questions to get to. How do we assist and prompt students to acknowledge their own lens and power and identity and context within this design challenge? So thinking of, if you have a group of students from all different backgrounds and all different skill sets, how would you help assist students to prompt that and make sure that all voices are heard during that time?
I also just want to contextualize this. I just want to contextualize this question too, in that this is not a question with the right answer, right? We have an hour together right now to talk about this, and this is a big question students will be working on, and it's a big question of this question that we're answering about assisting students in this process. And so we know it's going to be messy and complex, but I think the opportunity of students with different backgrounds coming together around this question is amazing and unique. So any thoughts are welcome. There's no right answer. I know this is a big question. Yeah.
I think, you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that recognizing that a lot of students will come in with different understandings of power and identity, a few simple ways that you can sort of get at this larger aim is encouraging students to use I statements, so speaking from their personal experience, and then also a tool that I've used in the past is just telling students to step up, step back, to create space for students who may not feel as comfortable sharing with people they don't know. Those are two effective tools I've used in facilitating high schoolers.
Thank you very much.
We have a comment from Megan that says the training videos give a great way to touch on this by asking, quote unquote, have we heard everyone's voice? And quote unquote, does anyone have thoughts on this idea or what was said? Thanks for that.
All right, and then the last question I'll ask is, how do we assist students to reveal their authentic self in order to make sure the design process is equitable to all students, which kind of hit on similar things as the last question. But does anyone have any ideas for authenticity of self? Kind of what you mentioned too with have all voices been heard is a great example of that.
Well, I don't know if I'm on the phone, but I work with a group of students in St. Louis Park, and one of the things that we've prefaced sometimes in this group, it's a mentoring group, is starting by saying, this is a safe space, and we want everybody to participate. We've even done things sometimes where there's an object that if there's trouble with somebody not sharing, that the person that we pass around the object to make sure that people are sharing and listening when that one student is talking. Just to ensure that we begin the conversation by saying that, for the good of everybody, that this is a safe space. So we're not here to critique what somebody else says, because it's about sharing something that's personal about yourself. Even if it's an idea about the process that we're engaged in, it is about sharing something about yourself. So sometimes just starting the conversation that way is helpful for the students who feel less comfortable with the sharing piece.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. So I think when I think about it too, when I facilitate discussions, is also providing the language, like the safe space language with sentence stems, and have it readily available to students, so that when they're looking to make that courageous statement or that thought, that they have a way to start, because that can be really challenging. From what I
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's huge. Is those stems and those kind of tools support. Heather also says that demonstrating our own vulnerability and role modeling authenticity to the best of our ability. Absolutely. And Justin says, true, Heather, good thought.
Thank you so much for engaging and having participating in these conversations and this dialogue. One last thing we want to hit on that some of us will be also judging during the day, and just wanted to recognize a little bit of how this equity plays into the judging portion as well of your volunteering. And that is with just a quick situation. A website about global warming is more impactful than a rap song about global warming. And so we want to just quickly talk about how is this bias relevant in this statement, and how are we valuing one thing and kind of devaluing another with this statement. So I wanted to open that up in, again, a dialogue and conversation, thinking about those two questions. I can start. I think that this statement devalues the impact that a rap song can make, right, and delegitimizes it as an art form and poetry, and so kind of devalues one method or mode to communicate information that should be valued greater.
Clara says that she thinks it's really important to not think this way. It's really narrow-minded, not to mention that it completely disregards the content of the project altogether. And Megan says that she believes she understood the judging portion. We are to be encouraging and helpful rather than criticizing the work that has been done by the students.
So maybe we could change the name of our role to not have the label of judge.
Yeah.
We framed it as exactly that in yesterday's webinar with the equity actual judge trainer, and talked about how it is inequitable in and of itself. So, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that if there are suggestions for other titles for that role, we're open. I completely agree. Yeah. A comment was also brought up yesterday about the assumptions that might be made about the information that went into creating either form, so that websites might be more research-based, and that an art form like rap isn't research-based, right? But there's so much research and information that can go into creating an art form like rap in the same way that it can a website. And Justin says, yes, based on the judge training, maybe we would ask, why did you choose that medium? Absolutely. And finally, also, someone brought this up yesterday too, and it's very obvious in the statement, right, of communities that, communities of color and low-income communities of color, marginalized communities, are communities that often use rap and other forms of music and art to express ideas, and so there is a lot of racism inherent in this statement as well, and that websites and academic spaces like that are often white-dominated spaces.
And Justin, to your point, you're on it, and that we just ask that you seek to understand. And so when you're in those judging spaces, you are asking those questions of why was a rap song chosen as your method, and not a website, and what's the population you're trying to speak to with your so forth. So absolutely ask those questions and make that very a great learning experience for students as well. Are there any questions with what we've gone through up to this point? All right, then I'm going to turn it over to Kelsey to go over a few logistics.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to go really quickly through this. This is all information you have in other places, and then we'll open it up for Q&A in the last few minutes as well. So just a few reminders. On the day of, you'll arrive around 9, unless you've communicated that with me or unless you have a different role. We'll have a volunteer shirt for you to wear on that day. It's a t-shirt, our new logo, would be great. We do ask that you wear those and plan to wear those. It's helpful, especially within a facilitator role, and throughout the day that students can see that and use that as a visual indicator for who they can look to for support or assistance. Also, please bring your phone and your charger. Facilitators will be judging in the morning, and you might be in competition rooms where you're submitting the rubric via an online form. So if you don't have access to a mobile device with Wi-Fi access, please let me know. We'll figure that out. But please bring a charger too. And an overview of your day. Again, you'll arrive at 9 at St. Thomas. You can park in the Anderson parking facility, and we'll have vouchers at the day for that. So you can go in there, and we'll have information about that on the day. We'll be in the 3rd floor of the Anderson Student Center, which will be across the street, across Summit. And that's where registration and check-in will be. And you'll have time in the morning to check in, settle in, get all the information you have, and have some time to review that. And then you're going to head to your judging room around 10. So again, if you're a facilitator, you'll be judging projects in the morning and facilitating in the afternoon. And so the judging period will happen between 10:30 and 11:45. You'll either be in the showcase room, which is going to be in the main room, the ballroom, where we're having the opening ceremony, and viewing a few projects and giving more qualitative feedback on a feedback form in that way. Or you'll be in a competition room where you'll see about 4 student projects and submit that online rubric. And there's more information about those pathways in those videos. And if you have questions about that, you can definitely let me know. And then we'll have lunch, and that's when we'll be setting up the ballroom for the design challenge for the knowledge to action experience. Students will be eating in the same room that we are using for that time. So it's going to take all of us to kind of transition that space and get things set up on the tables in a way that students can still be eating while we're getting set up. And then we'll transition the room to the knowledge to action experience, which will happen from 12:30 to 1:30. After that, and that's when you'll be facilitating. After that is the closing ceremony, so students will stay in the room, they'll retouch base with their teachers and their schools, and that's when we'll be recognizing student work, we'll be giving awards, final statements, and closing up the day in a really fun, energizing, and forward-facing tone of the day. So that's what your day looks like, and I'll open up to questions at the end, but and this is just the times of what the day looks like. So when you arrive at 9, that's when the students will be arriving as well and going through registration. And so there'll be staff available, and this is really a time to settle in, get all the logistics figured out for the day. And you might be able to see part of the opening ceremony, but we'll recommend that you head to your judging space and get ready to go so that when the students arrive, you can get started right away. And then there'll be some transition time for students to get where they need to be. The presentations are in the morning. And then, again, some transition time for students to get from their presentation space to lunch, the knowledge to action experience, and the closing ceremony. Thank you, Erica. And again, those resources. So I sent everyone the facilitator guide, which has a few different documents linked in there. The case studies linked in there, a detailed outline of activities for the knowledge to action experience, and your role at each step is linked. The diversity and inclusion statements that were in the facilitator training video, and a lot of what-if scenarios, so different scenarios with students or a team that you might encounter, and some resources and support ideas around that. The training videos, if you haven't viewed all of those, there was a new one added, the facilitator training video, that playlist. that is all great information, and I would definitely recommend making sure that you have time to see those before the day of the festival. And finally, I will send the World Savvy Classroom's rubric for the judging portion of the day in a follow-up email. So I'll send a follow-up email tomorrow morning with all these documents again, and a recorded version of this training too. But those are some resources you have. And so that's just a quick recap on some of those logistics. But at this point, in the last bit of time, I wanted to open it up to any discussion or questions that you have about this training, about what we've been talking about, logistics, your role, the day, anything you want to go over or review. I'd love to open it up to questions. Also, I think there will be questions that will be beneficial for everyone, but if you have to jump off, you can do that whenever you need to, and we'll stick around for questions. So thank you all so much. This has been an amazing discussion, and I think these discussions and this thinking will continue on the day as well with students and with each other. And so I so thank you for taking your time tonight and on the day of the festival to make this experience possible for students. So thank you so much.
I second that. Thank you.
Clara says, will there be a space to keep belongings, like a backpack, safe and out of the way? Yeah, Clara, there'll be one of the rooms on the 3rd floor of the Anderson Student Center, which is kind of going to be our hub for the day. We'll have a volunteer registration room, and there'll always be staff in there. That's where you'll register, and we'll have that space be where you can store personal belongings. Great question. Any other questions or comments? One thing I just thought of too, logistic point that someone else had a question about. So depending on how many students are there for final registration and how many facilitators come to the day, that will dictate how many student teams you're working with during that time. And so the tables that you will be working with, you'll touch base with Calvin at the beginning of that hour and have a specific